We're here today at the West Watkins Research and Extension Center, located just 10 miles east of Atoka, Oklahoma, at the city of Lane. And this is one of the OSU experiment station research stations that a few years back was primarily a vegetable research facility. Well, times change, and this facility is now really primarily a livestock facility, but we still do have some fields where we do vegetable research work here. And in fact, there's one part of the station that has been certified organic for over 10 years, and that is still maintained, and we do a little bit of vegetable work there, so also. As well as some bee work and studies on providing nectar sources for honeybees. Right now, what we're looking at is one of several trials we have going on in different parts of the state, where we're studying how to manage squash bugs in cucurbit crops. In this crop we're in today, this trial is in actually a yellow squash. Home gardeners, commercial vegetable growers that grow crops like this squash, if you ask them if they know what a squash bug is, they'll kind of give you a funny look, and they will say, squash bug is one of my major problems. Squash bugs here in Oklahoma, they're just, the climate seems to be well suited to them, and their populations can build up in these crops terribly. And many times, if they're not controlled, they can actually kill the squash plants before you can even harvest anything out of them. So managing your squash bugs is going to be a necessary procedure or skill that you're going to need if you're going to grow these crops, and especially if you're growing if you're in business to do it to make any money off of them. Now, of course, there's insecticides that can be used to control the squash bug, but there's some problems involved with that too. The way squash bugs behave here in Oklahoma, they overwinter as adults, okay, and you can find them in brush piles, in storage buildings, and things like that during the winter months. Once springtime comes around, they will come out of their overwintering location, and they're very specific for plants in this family, the watermelon, squash, cucumber family. And they can sense from long distances where there's a active crop growing, and they will fly to that crop so they can arrive there and begin to feed and begin to lay their eggs and start the generation for that summer. Now, so you might say, well, you just need to watch for those insects, and when they get to your crop, treat with an insecticide. There's several problems there, in that the adult squash bugs, they're not easy to kill with insecticides, okay? If you use the insecticides following the label instructions and all that, it can be very difficult. Part of the problem is, when do you apply it? The squash bugs, they arrive at the plants. They're very secretive. Many times your plants, there'll be a lot of squash bugs there, but they're down low at the base of the plant, and the grower doesn't even realize they're there until you've already got a huge population there and already doing damage to the crop. So another problem is, again, pollination. Pollination is very important in squash production if you're going to produce any fruit, okay? If you don't have any pollinators there, you can have beautiful plants and with lots of flowers, but you're not going to produce any fruit. So to get back to the problem with the insecticides, when you've got all this pollinator activity going on a daily basis, when are you going to apply the insecticides? Because the insecticides, while they will control the insect pests, they can also injure the pollinators. So, and many people would prefer just not to use any insecticide when those pollinators are there. Okay, so we're looking at some alternative methods to be able to manage these insect pests, and also taking into account the pollinators. Well, one approach that we've been working on for several years now is to use row covers, as you see here, as a way of, and these covers are opened up right now, but in a little while we're going to close these covers back up, and these plants will be entirely covered, so the insects cannot get to the plants, okay, once they're covered back up. The idea behind this is to keep them closed for basically about 22 hours a day. They'll be covered up. We'll open them for a couple hours in the morning at the time when the pollinators are most active, allow those pollinators to get in there, get to the flowers and do their job, and then we'll close it back up. And actually with this squash, what we find out is by about 10 o'clock in the morning, the flowers are closing up anyhow. So we're really not, that would be the time, just, you know, for several hours in the morning when that pollination takes place. So now we've looked at several different angles as far as how to use these row covers. Again, looking at different ways to provide that pollinator, provide that access time for the pollinators to get to the plants. And again, this, like I said, the method here is to open up the covers for a couple hours and close them back up. Well, one question that arises is, what are you going to use to cover the squash with? Okay, there's different kinds of horticultural fabrics and things out there that could be used. What we're doing with this trial, we're actually comparing two different types of what we call spun-bound materials, and they're different weights. So one of them is heavier than the other. And then we're also looking at one which is actual netting type material, okay? Again, just trying to see which ones do the best job. We know that they'll all keep the insects out, but number one, it may be that some of them affect the crop growth and the fruit production different than others would. Another thing we've noticed is that with the netting one, we have some powdery mildew in here, in the squash here, and the powdery mildew seems to be much more severe where we've used the netting material rather than the fabric type materials. So now on the other hand, that earlier on, and again we're just collecting our data, so we don't have final results, but something we noticed early on is the plants with the netting, they seem to be much more productive as far as fruit set and all. So the netting does have some benefits, but again, we later saw that it seemed to encourage the powdery mildew more than the others. So.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.